You are now listening to Coach Ham's Chronicles, the show that spills all types of leadership tea for the aspiring leader of colour.
Hello and welcome to Coach Ham Chronicles, or better yet, tonight's episode is going to be a very special episode of Coach's Corner. I am your host, Coach Ham, and tonight I am back with the infamous Jay in Transit, Miss Juana Silvario, but as she will say, it's Juana Silvario. So, we're back with Jay in Transit, and also we have another coach that decided that she was just going to come and hang out in my corner and just kind of kiki it up. So it's also Coach Ren. Tonight we're going to be actually talking about this whole lot of ESPN controversy, the fake allyship, and everything in between. So before we kind of get into the meat and potatoes and really just kind of kiki it up tonight, Jay, Ren, welcome to the show, or better yet, my new corner. Tell the audience who you are, what you're about, and why y'all are just so freaking dope.
Ooh, well, thank you for having me again. Jay in Transit is my podcast, but VIP coaching is what I do some career development and leadership coaching on. And I'm here today to talk about, as you mentioned, fake allyship and how it's showing up in our present space and what we could expect when we go back into the workplace, which we're all not looking forward to.
And Miss Ren?
I just kind of got thrown into this, but I'm excited to be with you ladies and answer any questions and give my opinion where, I see fit, I guess.
All right. Well, that's what we're going to do. Yeah. Okay. Well, so when we're talking about fake allyship, right, we're talking about it's very surface level. These are your fakers, and not even fake it till you make it. These are straight up fakers with the Black Lives Matter t-shirts.
Girl.
They were at all the events, but behind closed doors, they are really not trying to get y'all at the table. Point blank, period. You're still going to have them crusty white men suits from like the 99 clearance rack suit type of photos. That's where it is. They're not really trying to see you. They're not trying to have us. But for the optics side of the house, because this is such a movement now, and it's basically Jim Crow 2.0, at the end of the day, they're like, yeah, I'm down for the cause. But yet, we still don't have you speaking up for us behind closed doors.
That's
you
right.
Still are mispronouncing our names. You're not being consistent. And on top of it all, you also scared of change, because regardless of whether I give you recommendations or provide you with some type of strategies, at the end of the day, you don't really trust that I know what I'm talking about, because you're not necessarily believing that I can do my job effectively. So that's pretty much kind of the premise of what we're kind of getting into. But then also, I know everybody's been talking about this whole ESPN controversy with the reporter that apparently, and I know Jay, we were just talking about this.
Yes.
Her contract's up in like 2 weeks.
Yes.
And for those who don't really know what we're talking about, there was an ESPN reporter that was probably one of the primary female reporters that is hired by ESPN. She's been doing most of, and Jay, correct me if I'm wrong, NFL and NBA reporting.
Yes.
And apparently ESPN decided that her time was up, and they wanted to promote a sister, basically, woman of color. And she felt some type of way. So she realized that after she does her recording that apparently the camera was still on, and she's talking with a friend of hers, like apparently, like unbeknownst to her, while there's still audio, and it's capturing everything. And she's pissed, she's hot, she's basically slightly being petty, and a couple of words start slipping out, like they gave her this job because she was black. And yeah, go ahead.
That's essentially what we're reading into it. So the woman, she's a sister because she's a woman, but she's not a sister because she's black. So we'll clear that up real quick.
Right.
And what it brought up was not just in this scenario, what it brought up, it wasn't just competition amongst women, but it was, what are you saying about us behind closed doors? And as Coach Ham mentioned, this young woman was caught speaking to a colleague that was not part of ESPN about how ESPN made the move to promote a sister who was as equally talented, if probably not more, if I do say so, biasly or not, She has more rapport on the court. Okay, she's gorgeous to boot, and versatile. So why would you not want this beauty? Talking to these other very talented, beautiful men. So I mean, that's just my opinion. However, if we're looking at talent, if we're looking at merit, both of these ladies had it, and the decision was to give it to the sis. Which really caught the craw of this other woman who thought she had it in the bag, as you'd mentioned. What came up in these conversations and why we decided to talk about it is because most likely the woman who was caught talking, we'll call her R. So R was caught talking behind M's back. And M probably thought this was her friend.
Yeah.
They
figured, I think what R was mentioning to her friend was like, this is such a small pond, and ESPN is such a huge company that there's not that many female reporters. So of course, naturally, these positions are going to be competitive, and you have to bring your A game. But the fact that she decided that she was going to use the infamous trump card of color is, I think, where there's a huge misnomer of saying, all right, not only is this sister able to do her job and do it effectively, because apparently a bunch of NBA players were speaking up on her behalf saying, yo, M got this job because she knows what she's doing. It's not because of her color. It's not all this other stuff that you're claiming to be in this little one side off show you had, sis. But this is literally what it is. Like, old girl knows what she's doing. So don't be mad. Just call it what it is. They're done seeing your face, Karen, and move to the left.
I felt like that was a slam dunk.
Go ahead, alley-oop, step on correct.
So that also does bring us, I did, want to make that distinction though, and we can talk about it between the three of us about what is performative allyship versus meaningful allyship. And so you mentioned this, Coach Ham. Performative allyship is all about the optics. It was about, all of these companies deciding to put the pride flag up as their logo on all the social media realms during Pride Month. Yep. But on a regular basis, you allow for the workplace, inside of the workplace, for jokes, to just be had, and you laugh them off and don't have a distinct a policy or way of being, to condemn that action.
Yeah. I mean, it even comes
these companies that put up the pride flag, during Pride Month or whatever, do they have benefits for gays and lesbians? You know what I mean? Because you can't tell me, oh, we support the LGBTQ community, but yet, you have a gay person in your company whose husband can't get on his medical plan.
Amen, girl.
Ooh.
And that is the difference between performative and meaningful allyship.
Yep.
And you said it so well.
And I think it's even more interesting. A lot of these companies have these zero tolerance sexual harassment policies, right? So why can't we have a zero tolerance performative allyship policy? It's like, if you don't fake it, you better real life truth make sure that this is what you're gonna walk the walk. So you got these shirts that be like Black Lives Matter, but why is your entire leadership all white, sir? I'm confused.
All white men.
All right, all white men, and maybe the one semi-white woman that always, continuously thinks that she's a minority. I'm like, please stop telling me that joke. That's hilarious. Right. And she's like, I'm so serious. I'm like, you are crazy, girl. You are nuts.
I agree.
So you're right. Like, I think a big thing is saying, hey, you're not really interested in learning about this diversity. It sounds good. It's cute. You checked a box on your performance review, and it's also not something that you're interested in really doing. And I think honestly what really starts to hit people more or less home is when their daughter or son brings home a minority, and then all of a sudden they're super woke.
Right.
Like, let your Becky daughter bring home a Tyrone.
Listen. Or for all of these,
and there's always Tyrone from the hood.
Yes, right.
Not never corporate Tyrone either.
No. Tyrone, whose corporate had changed his name to Tyler a long time ago. And that's going to be a whole nother episode of
That's right.
basically code switching. We'll be talking about that probably next week. Okay. All right. So back to our regular program. You know what's funny, right? So of course, you know, with my show, I'm all about the numbers. Like, let's start fact checking stuff, right? So when you're talking about these Black professionals, and they're only accounting for 11% of new board seats since 2018. 11%. That's it.
11%.
Right. I mean, when I first saw some of these numbers, I was like, well, I'm just happy it's 11, because originally I was going to put it at a 3 or a 4. And yet it's still crazy because it's, you know, overwhelmingly small compared to the amount of white and white male.
Right.
So I guess the question comes down to, like, can fear be perceived of why we're not getting a seat? Or is it more or less, you know, a racist or a sexist that's motivating white progressives to start shifting? And I know us being like 3 women of color, we're very much so just kind of guesstimating this because we don't have a white man on this show. But I think, you know, I just want to get your perspective, or both your perspectives, on, you know, what the heck is going on with this percentage. It's super low.
I'm not sure if at this day and age we can say fear, right? Is it fear repercussions? No, because I think that we're, you know, corporate is run by money. So they will do something as long as the money continues to come in. And whether that is performative for X amount of time and then we go back to the status quo, they're going to do that. And so I don't think that we as a society have developed enough consequences to actually instill a level of fear to up these conversations at the table. What will motivate progressives to actually continue this fight, or or white progressives in particular, to become authentic allies? I think we have to actively call out fake progressives. You know, a lot of the times they will hire people, you know, they will hire the look, but they're not necessarily giving them the power to have, you know, to make the decisions. You know, they will definitely be all about the optics, but they don't put any meat on the bone. And it happens across a lot of progressive organizations, whether it's in the public or private sector. What do you think, Bren?
No, I agree. Something you said triggered something, but it just went away. Jeez, when that happens.
It'll come back. How about you, Coach Ham?
I don't think that it's honestly a fear-based thing. I do think that it's kind of twofold, right? That when it comes down to authority in these positions, that they feel like they're going to lose the upper hand. And I kind of see it on a regular basis, even in, you know, current climates, is that you're so used to hiring people that sound like you, think like you, look like you, that it's very rare that you start bringing in all of these individuals that are the polar opposites, especially when we start talking about like generational gaps, because boomers are probably the one generation that will really be a outlier to why, you know, millennials are not necessarily getting that, you know, bring them under the wing type of relationship, because they're like, nah, you young, I don't want to hear what you got to say. Like, you still are on somebody's nipple. Sit down, little baby. It's like, bruh, like, come on now. I'm 30-something years old, but you're still a baby.
Something you said just reminded me of what I was thinking earlier, that I think a lot of when you go to look at like the corporate heads of companies and they're older white men, maybe 1 or 2 older white women, that they've been stuck in their ways for so long and probably come from a racist background, whether it's their direct parents, grandparents, whatever, that the thought of having someone of color, whether it's Black, Hispanic, you know, on their level scares them. But when you look at younger companies, I find that you see a lot more diversity because these are people that they grew up with. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, you know, someone in their 30s, 40s, you know, who grew up in a more mixed neighborhood is not going to have that fear of hiring someone, you know, that's Black or Hispanic or whatever, because they went to school with that person. They saw this person come up, you know, having the same education as them, you know, maybe not always the same opportunities, but you know,
Right.
that fear isn't the same. Like you're coming to take my job, because they know that, you know, we kind of went through the same things together, and, you know, you fought to get here just as much as I did. Whereas, you know, older people are kind of like, no, 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 you know, this is all white and clean. We know what we're doing. We've been doing this for ages, and we don't need, you know, any young blood coming in, taking over. I know when I was at Coke, I worked for the CAO, Chief Accounting Officer, and he was younger than, well, is because he's still alive, younger than me. I'm 48. No, we were saying he's a little older, because I think Jody will be 52 this year. And people at Coke, especially Consolidated, had been there forever. I remember within my first year, we retired a lady that had been there for 45 years. I'm like, sweet Jesus, how do you come to the same job for 45 years?
And she was probably happy about life. Like, hey, y'all, how y'all doing?
But I also, you know, looking back or thinking back, I'm like, she probably came, you know, right out of high school, no college degree, probably didn't even have a high school degree, you know, and the longer you stay there, you get pigeonholed. And then, you know, when companies are like, they need a degree, you know, for you to come in as a receptionist, she's like, crap, I might as well stay here. You know, plus she also came in at a time when Coke was offering pensions. They don't do that anymore. So whatever. But back to Jody, you know, a lot of people in our department were older and used to doing things, you know, an older way, you know, taking forever to close the books at the end of the month, at the end of the quarter, you know, having files full of paper that who has file cabinets anymore? You know, so when he decided that he wanted to bring in younger blood that could speed up the process, like all the older people were like, whoa, 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 you trying to, you know, get us out? And that really wasn't it. It was like, listen, we can't keep closing the books 10 days every month, which means you're only working 10 days a month. You know what I mean? So I think it's really the older generation that has the bigger problem with hiring minorities and being true allies versus just bringing them in for optics. Like, you know, somebody, the board of whatever was like, okay, we're getting heat that, you know, we don't have a person of color, you know, as a department head. So let's go ahead and promote someone or bring someone in and, you know, put his face on all the, you know, company whatever, you know, so people can see that, you know, we do have a person of color, but it's not really meaningful.
It's those diversity inclusion posters that I hate.
Yes, exactly.
It's like, look, we have an Asian. He's over there. They're like, bro, really?
So that's a perfect segue into the question you had, Coach Ham, about the diversity statement that you wanted us to opine on.
Oh man. So so we're talking about diversity, right? And having it look like a certain kind of thing that people are often having to participate, regardless of whether or not they've changed the rules in the culture. What do you think about that statement? Like, we believe that diversity is about having it look like all kinds of people are participating, regardless whether or not they actually are. Like, are we okay with that? Are we not?
And I think that we, in this day and age, as Coach Ren pointed out, is that while that's what it meant for the older generation who, you know, had the seat at the table and controlled the room, it no longer is about what it looks like. It's no longer about just having a woman at the table, woman X, or just having a Black man show up to the meetings. I don't think that true diversity, true inclusion, and true equity, right? Because now they've changed the whole the course of this work. It's diversity, equity, and inclusion. It is about a shift. We cannot achieve either one of those goals without shifting mindsets, without shifting the culture within, without, you know, having comprehensive conversations, and then actually bringing in tangible results to show that not only did we hear you, we listened and we care. And so to answer your question in the end, no, I no longer I never stood for that, but it's definitely not a statement that many companies are standing behind this day and age. And if they are, they're going to be left behind really quickly.
Mm. But I think that's a problem when you have all these newer companies. Like when I think of what allyship would or potentially look like, I'm thinking of the Googles, the Facebooks, the Netflix, where people could pretty much come to work in, vans and khakis and have like a bunch of sleeve tattoos. But when we start looking at, you know, government, right?
Right.
Capitol Hill, White House, that has always been managed and ran by one side or the other, whether it's far left, far right, or everything in between. So I think what needs to be a very clear defining moment, whether it's this uh, administration or the next, is to be able to say, okay, how are we shifting? How are we moving? And then also, how are we able to pivot? And I think this administration was very clear about it. And I'm not sure if the agenda was just because we had uh, 4 years of menace and mayhem, and Biden was just like, you know what, I need to get this vote, y'all, and I know where I got to go. But then also everybody else on the back end, like, all right, Uncle Joe, you going to said these things, so now you got to pony up. Which I love the fact of looking at most of his cabinet members are minorities, but
Right.
a part of me on the other side is like, well, is it because you had to do it, or do you honestly believe in the fact that these are probably the better suited individuals for these positions?
Right.
So
I know it's going to be a challenge for this administration to make that meaningful shift in culture. I mean, we
yeah,
saw it in the news when early on in the administration there were some of his White House staffers who were denied a security clearance because they had smoked marijuana. Now,
yep,
marijuana is legal, or recreational use of marijuana and medicinal marijuana is legal in
right,
DC even.
yeah,
But it was a stark reminder
hmm,
that we're not all equal in all across all work spaces, no matter how progressive
yeah.
that the person in that leadership chair projects to be to the world.
And but not only that, right? So even for the uh, the states that have made this a legalized thing, it's still illegal federally. So which
Correct.
sucks for like most people that are government workers. It's like,
Yep.
yeah, state folks can smoke it, but you government person, good old government job, don't even think about it. You know,
And it's
yeah,
and
folks are getting left off.
it's only state workers or
Yes,
state folks without a federal hook, because
exactly. Yeah,
there are
right.
some um, private sector companies that still have federal regulations, and so they are also held to these restrictions.
And it's funny that we kind of got into this other segue of talking about validity and what that looks like when we're starting to optimize allyship and
Mm.
being able to decipher between what is valid and equal versus the criticisms against being, an optical ally or a performative ally. So I guess what I'm asking you and Ren, what advice would you give those who are struggling to find the direction in between the two?
To come back full circle with the ESPN controversy, you know, um, we're looking at folks who are going to speak about our accomplishments, not only in public, but behind closed doors, right? So they're not going to undermine my performances and maximize my deficiencies in order to get ahead. And that would be, how I say you build the muscle of authentic allyship and get beyond the optics of just saying you're my partner, and when I'm being talked over in meetings or I'm being passed through at performance evaluations to get $10,000 more in my bonus is not allyship.
Right.
And
Right.
so there has to be, skin in the game. You have to be willing to sacrifice something or have a consequence. And sometimes that consequence is someone's going to be giving you some more side eyes. But guess what? We live with side eyes.
Yeah. I think we are the proprietors of shade, to which is thrown, to which is given. And I like to wear it as a gold chain around my neck. Yeah, you're
Right.
absolutely right. And I think at the core of it is saying, hey, we're equals, regardless of skin, creed, ethnicity, religion, and everything in between. And what needs to be taken very seriously is like you need to have action behind it. You're right, not just the skin in the game, but it's like I need to see you actually do something about this.
Right.
And if you can understand that, and that means you've actually invested your time, your money, your effort in making sure that minorities or those who've been in disproportionate communities are actually getting access to what they need, then we know that things are starting to transform. We know that this becomes not just a concept of strategy because it sounds good, which is all
Right.
about the optical side of the house. Like it sounds good, it looks
Mm-hmm.
good,
Mm-hmm.
but now the strategies are shifted into the action side of the house. Like this is the performative allyship. This is what I know to be true, is saying, you know what, not only am I going to talk this talk, but I'm about to skate right through it and I'm about to walk, kick doors in, be like, yep, I'm gonna bring you, and definitely you to the table. Let's start changing the game.
Absolutely. I will say that there are some folks who don't get enough credit for that. One of my former mentors, um, internally at one of my companies would do just that. And, you could feel the power of her sponsorship and allyship just by the fights she decided to take on, whether they were, publicly or through her insistence on the back end about how things should be. And she never had to raise her voice. This wasn't a pointing fingers, heated conversations in boardrooms, but you could feel that through her actions and her words, whether they were, out loud or via email or behind closed doors, that you had someone who was sticking up for you in all senses of the word.
Mm. What you got on this, Ren? Because you super quiet.
No, I mean, I'm totally in agreement with, what Coach Wanda said. I mean, for someone coming up, it's kind of hard because, you want to believe that after everything we've been through this last year or so, between COVID, between, all the shootings of, Black men, that, all these people that were coming out as so-called allies, chanting with us, Black Lives Matter, and blah, 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 wearing the shirts and all that stuff, that where it really matters, that's where they're gonna, really stand up for us. Because you coming to a rally, it's not gonna make a difference if behind closed doors, when, Tom and Roger are sitting there, contemplating who should get a promotion, and you're not opening up your mouth and saying, listen, I understand that, you guys want to promote John, but Raheem over here, he's been putting in the hours, putting in the work, and you guys need to promote him.
Right.
Just don't, in public, like, Wanda said, everybody wants to raise their fist and, say everything that they think needs to be said to sound good. But we need you putting in the work where it really matters.
And that literally kind of goes into that scarcity, theory of saying, you know what, there's never going to be enough time to do what's right. And there's never going to be enough time to have the right contacts and make it feel genuine. But when
Right.
you are falling under that level of scarcity or even having that scarcity mindset, this is what makes you want to play it safe. And it's not because you're also trying to lose face, but it's because you're knowing that things aren't always going to be done the way that you are wanting them to or expecting them to, but it's just enough, or you're doing the bare minimum to hit these diversity pillars, if you will. So then you, A, don't appear to be tone deaf to the current platform or culture, but then also it kind of eliminates this form of having to live between both worlds of saying, well, I want to do what's right, but I can't, or I'm going to be ostracized. And it's all of that, right? You know, that's that fear. That's the thing we were talking about earlier, but also having to realize that you're going to have to eliminate this type of perfectionism or protectism of this corporate thinking to really start opening just a bandwidth of having more people or just having diversity of thought, more or less,
Right.
so you can have these conversations, so you
Right.
can get actual real change. Because I think when we start talking about, you know, more numbers, because I'm a nerd, you know, much of that racial disparity that's in the US is tracked back to, you know, economics, the
Mm-hmm.
generational wealth, the wealth gap, you know,
Mm-hmm.
from, you know, Greenwood, you know, all the way down to Tulsa. But also realizing that, you know, while Black people only comprise of like 13% of American population, we still hold less than 3% in the nation's wealth, which
Right.
I think is crazy, which of course makes total sense of why you got Mississippi burning and everything else on fire. But when you start talking about just the median, right, and the net worth, we're talking about for white families, it's like $171,000, which is 10 times more of an average middle class Black family could make in 1 year.
Wow.
Yeah, like drop the mic. So y'all think about that while y'all trying to, you know, get a shirt made for 15,000 people.
Thank
10,
you.
yeah, right, 10,000, like 10 times more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's astounding, and it's, you know, there's so much work to be done. And I just, there was a question you'd asked previously about, is there a rule of thumb for knowing when to speak up, especially when you are in spaces like the C-suite or the partner realm?
Mm.
Um, and, you know, I was giving it thought, and I'm thinking that, you know, one of the suggestions I would make is, instead of looking at how this, you know, person can make you look good, how can this person contribute and fill the gap that you don't have? So how can you make this a partner, an equal contribution relationship versus just an optical relationship? And I don't think that we look at that when we are looking to promote or fill in any of the gaps that we're being told we have.
Mm. I think it's also that, but realizing that there is a gap. I think a lot of people still live in this hazy world of, you know, rose-colored glasses, that everything is great. We don't need to change anything. You know,
Right.
there's no problem with the current status. I don't understand, you know, why everybody's in a hubbub. You know, January 5th still didn't happen to me. Yeah, right. All of that wrapped up in, here's some things that we're noticing.
Right.
Here's the current culture. Here's the current climate. And it doesn't matter if you do a climate survey for your entire, you know, corporation, or you could just look, you know, being in an office for more than a week and see, okay, you're looking for a certain type of person because they sound all the same. They're very robotic. They're not willing to speak up. They're the yes
Mm-hmm.
men, the yes women. So being able to be okay with the fact that if you're going to speak up, you know, realize that there are going to be some L's that you may end up having to take
Right.
career wise, and you have to be okay with that. You know, I think that, you know, is a big thing that most people are not willing to speak up or even advocate for us because they know on the back end, their career is on the line.
That's a really good point.
Yeah. I mean, it's having to tell people like, all right, you know, I don't care. Like, I'm a ride or die. Like, that's what I start thinking of, like a true allyship. And
Yeah.
even bringing back full circle for ESPN, regardless of the climate, if you know that M was going to do this amazing thing and she has this rapport with the players and she also knows her stats like the best of them, who cares that she ended up being a sister, even though she wasn't a sister? You
Right.
know, she was the best person for the job. And, you know, there's no trump card that you could have potentially used at the end of the day. I do think that part of it was like, you know what, R, you was just being a little petty. I'm sorry, sis.
Mm.
I'm just gonna call it. You was petty. I get it. It's a very competitive field. But your time was up.
The
And
time
you
is
gotta
up.
be okay, right? It's okay. It's time for you to go ahead, move on to something else, and call it what it is. I guarantee the View, they rotate out folks. You go work for them. I don't know.
Oh,
I swear I saw LeVar Burton on there.
there is an opening, I hear.
See, that's what I'm saying. LeVar Burton, Mr. Reading Rainbows on there now currently. So I'm like, I don't know who they got. But all of that kind of comes back to saying, as we wrap up for the evening, being able to speak up, stand up, be a true ally. And we're not doing it for optics. For those who are, listening and following either myself or Jay in Transit, that our main platform and premise is making sure that we're bringing minorities and aspiring leaders of color to get seats at the table. And we're
That's
not
right.
about, mediocrity. We're definitely not about fakeness. So we're talking about authenticity at its finest. And you have to be willing to take that risk, because that's what allyship is, meaning that you're willing to put everything else on the line to make sure that what's right is right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a pretty good wrap. But I know before we roll off of our coach's corner, I would say, Jay, Ren, we want to leave our folks with some thoughts.
Why are you looking at me?
I can't top it more than what you've said, Coach Ham, other than there's room for all of us.
There really is.
And why do we want to continue to perpetuate, the status quo when we have to play so much catch up and innovation, not just here in the US, but around the world, when we hog up information and networks? You're just hampering wealth all around. So if we go into it by beating the scarcity mindset that you mentioned earlier and thinking like, I'm going to eat and I'm going to eat well and I'm going to eat every day and more than I can afford, then there won't be all of this petty back and forth, and optics will actually be performing at optimal levels.
Okay. Snap. All right. Snap. All right, Coach Ren, you go ahead and close us out.
Jesus. I'm just going to go ahead and second what you both said. And that's how we're going to wrap it up.
I actually want to give kudos to Coach Ren for jumping in and giving us a perspective from her industry that, we potentially could have missed. So thank you.
I definitely have.
Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. We'll definitely be having you back. I think that Coach's Corner is going to be our newest thing, maybe once a month. We can kiki it up and just talk about some real life stuff that they're not going to talk about their 9 to 5. And with that being said, if you have not already subscribed to our mailing list or even joined our community on Facebook, Think Like a Guru, Great Leaders Rising Up, definitely hit us up at hello@paramintelligence.com, and we will see you guys next week. Peace.